Why did I not stop in Beaver Creek when I left Whitehorse? The morning I got up to load up my bike in Whitehorse and head to Beaver Creek, I was checking my air pressure, and I noticed I had a cut in my back tire. So, riding on gravel roads, that wouldn't last very long, so I needed a tire. And when I got to Fairbanks, I was going to need my oil change because I was going to be over 6,000 miles. So I called Fairbanks, the Fairbanks Harley-Davidson, to see if they had my tire. They do not carry the tire I have. They said that's not the tire recommended. Although I did explain to them it was a Dunlap and it was a Harley-Davidson Dunlap tire. It's just not the ones that come on them brand new. Plus, being in Alaska, they have supply issues and cost money, and so they only carry very minimal supplies. But they did have a tire that would fit my bike, so I had to be there first thing Thursday morning. So I had to drive 630 miles from Whitehorse to Fairbanks so I could be there in the morning for them to do the work. That night, when I was taking my dry bag off the motorcycle, I noticed the straps that I secure the dry bag to the trunk was the only thing holding my trunk on. It looked like the support for my trunk had broke. How'd that happen? The Canadian-Alaskan Highway, or the portion of the Canadian-Alaskan Highway. The last 100 miles was nothing but gravel and mud. And they had all the hazards well marked except for the one that I hit. As I rounded a curve, there was gravel and the mud. And I didn't have time to slow down. And typically they had the pavement ramp down to the gravel. This one was not. It was about a 1.5, 2 foot drop. And my 1,000-pound Harley-Davidson did not handle it well. I hit very hard, and I'm sure that's where it broke. So I asked them when I got there, told them about it, and if they had to support, which I knew they didn't, and if they had to order it, first they had to figure out what to order, but then once they ordered, it's 7 to 10 days. So what am I going to do for 7 to 10 days? In the meantime, while they were checking my tires and checking my bike over and changing oil, they noticed my right-hand rotor on the front brake was loose. He torqued the nuts and bolts down, and it's still loose. He described it, there's a mechanism in there, and it must have broken. And that's not anything that they carry, so they'd have to order it. Because those screws, if you take the rotors off, they're one-time use, you have to buy new screws. Because Harley makes a floating rotor. There's supposed to be a little bit of movement, just not a rattle movement. First off, they don't have the tire I want, and the tire they do have is twice the amount that I paid for both tires. But this is Alaska, and it costs a lot of money to ship stuff to Alaska. So I knew it would be more, just not twice as much as 2 tires. On top of my trunk broken and the front rotor. While they continued with the oil change and the tire change, I went and looked at a Harley that they had in stock. And my bike trunk was missing 2 screws. I don't know that those screws have ever been there because my trunk's always been a little loose, or I should say had a little play in it. So when I showed the mechanic, he went and found, yep, I was missing 2 screws, and luck had it, they had the screws. So my trunk's not broken, just all the plastic chrome that goes around the mount is broken, which I could care less about. But they had the screws. Now we're just worried about the rotor. In the meantime, I called Finks and Farrows. Farrows finally answered, and I asked them about the screws. They going to order all 10 of them because it's nothing they keep in stock. And guess what? They were on back order till September 25th. So nothing's being done with that front rotor. I've probably been driving this whole trip on that, or at least shortly after I started the trip, whatever happened, and it's got that slop in it. You can't tighten it down, you can't do anything. When I get home, I got to order the 10 screws and then wait till September till they show up. In the meantime, I have to sparingly use my front brake. So I got in there at 7:30 for oil change and tire change and my trunk fixed. Now it is, and they're all done with my bike. So I'm just waiting for them to bring it out to me. But guess what? It's lunchtime, and whatever food they ordered had arrived. So they were eating their lunch as I'm just there waiting and waiting. They finally bring my bike out at 1:45. I'm loading the trunk back up, loading my dry bag, putting the saddlebags on, which I had removed to make it easier for them to work on the back tire. And guess what? It starts pouring as I'm loading my motorcycle. And they are all just watching me, not offering to allow me to pull my bike inside so I can load it out of the rain and not get soaked. I'm finally all done. I'm getting ready to get on my bike, and the mechanic that worked on my bike came out and said, "Hey, why don't you come in, get a cup of coffee? There's no sense in you taking off in this rain, and just wait it out. Looks like it's going to break up here in a little bit." This is a family-run dealership. When I come in, the mechanic had me a cup of coffee. The wife of the owner brought me a towel to dry my face off. I plugged my dying phone in and sit there and waited. In about a half hour, the rain had stopped. So I texted and called Lori, told her I was heading out. She was asking how far I was going to try and make it on the Dalton Highway. I told her not more than probably 100 miles or so, since I was starting at 2 o'clock. Well, the more I was riding, there wasn't any place really to stop. Mosquitoes are horrible, so I really didn't want to camp. So I kept going and going. That picture I asked, you know what that is? That was the Alaskan oil pipeline that when I was first getting into Alaska. And these are pictures of the pipeline. It's above and below ground. Most of it, I believe, is above ground. There's a lot of pictures of the pipeline as I was riding along. That short section there, as it goes up the hill, goes underground. Because of the short growing season, the trees don't get very big. They'll get tall, but they're very skinny. Their growth rings you have to count with a magnifying glass. This was a wildfire went through, and those spinny little things, those trees, were very old before they got burned up. Some more pictures of the fires and just the brush that comes along. Sign just tells about the different pump stations to help push the oil along the pipeline. This one's a historic. I can't remember why, but it is. So I drove up the road, and this is what you see when you get up to the road. The start of the Dalton Highway. It actually starts 84 miles outside of Fairbanks. And the last gas station to get gas before you start the Dalton Highway is 54 miles before the Dalton Highway outside of Fairbanks. So you have to fill up there, and you have to carry gas with you. I have 2 5-liter gas tank cans that fit in my saddlebags, and that's what I'm carrying to make the span. Because even though I can get anywhere from 250 to 290 miles, that's if everything goes perfectly. The Dalton Highway is mud, gravel, and there's a lot of construction, a lot of waiting, so you need extra gas. It was just when was I going to stop and add the gas was the thing. Here is the Yukon River. the Yukon River Bridge. The Yukon River is a navigable river, and that's how most people used to travel in Alaska, because there weren't any roads and there's not really a rail system. So the Yukon River is how people got from Canada to Alaska to Anchorage, through Alaska to Anchorage, and to the interior that the Yukon served. And when the gold strike hit in Alaska, this is how a lot of people traveled. They had paddle wheels used to haul supplies and people around through Alaska. Again, I was trying to figure out how far I was going to go. When I reached the Arctic Circle, there's a campground there. So I thought, well, I'll just camp there. While I was taking this picture, I got carried away by mosquitoes. Not really, but there were hundreds of mosquitoes swarming me. So I decided, I don't know if I really want to camp in all these mosquitoes. And I'm about 60 miles from Coldfoot. So I decided that's where I'm going. About 10 miles up the road is where I pulled over to add my 2.6 gallons of gas to get me to Coldfoot. Now, I had talked to a few people who had ridden on the Dalton Highway, and I was assured my Harley Ultra Limited would have no problem riding the Dalton Highway. Well, as I reached the Arctic Circle, I decided, because of the condition of the road, because of all the rain they've had, the road was extremely muddy. And I couldn't tell you how many times I almost lost it and bit it, sliding around in the mud, riding up and down the mountains. It got to be where it was more scary, nerve-wracking than fun. And when I got to the Arctic Circle, if I could have turned around and made it, I would have, but I didn't have enough gas. So I had to go on to Coldfoot to get gas. And I had already decided, running over the washboard gravel, getting beat up on my motorcycle was not worth it. The suspension on 1,000+ pound Ultra Limited is not made to ride on this rough of a road. Now, if there hadn't been the rain and the mud, it'd be a different story. Trying to climb hills with the tires on my motorcycle, I was sliding all over the place, sliding up and down the hills. So it was nerve-wracking, to say the least. Now, according to the internet, there was 6 hotels in Coldfoot. There's one, and it was booked. The girl told me I could just pitch a tent. They'd let me do that out front. And as I looked out there, there was about 4 or 5 other tents pitched out there. So I coated myself with bug spray, set up my tent, went in and ate, took a shower, and went to bed. I tried to sleep anyway. I always thought I could sleep anywhere, anytime. But up here, when it's sunny all the time, 24 hours of daylight, I think that's messed with my sleep. So I laid in my tent mostly. I took cat naps. So, and this is a picture of Coldfoot. So when I got up in the morning, I ate breakfast and headed back towards Fairbanks. These are pictures inside the diner, cafe, restaurant, saloon at Coldfoot. Population about 20 people. This is a picture of a polar bear. In the caption, it says that it traveled 150 miles of the Dalton Highway from Prudhoe Bay. I can't remember what the year is. You can stop this and blow it up to see, but kind of amazing. Pictures of the pipeline. The Dalton Highway goes alongside of it a lot of the way. These are pictures I stopped and took on the way home, because at this time it really wasn't raining. Until now. I got hit about 100 miles from Fairbanks. Now, Coldfoot on the Dalton Highway, from the beginning of the Dalton Highway to Coldfoot, is 175 miles. It's 84 miles from Fairbanks to the start of the Dalton Highway. So that's roughly 260 miles I traveled. Well, then I left from Harley, so that's probably another 20 miles. So 280 miles. I left at 2 o'clock. I arrived at Coldfoot at 10 p.m. 8 hours to go 280 miles. That's another reason why I decided not to go on to Prudhoe Bay, because it was another 244 miles just to get there, so 488 miles round trip back to Coldfoot, and the road was pretty much like what I'd traveled. So getting beat up, pounded by the road, sliding all over, hoping I didn't lose it and dump my bike, and having a wrecked bike 600 miles from civilization. I'd be better off just walking away than to worry about trying to have a totaled motorcycle hauled somewhere. Then how do I get back to Fairbanks? So I decided I had completed my Dalton Highway experience. Now I know I probably could have finished it, but I didn't want to risk beating the crap out of myself and my bike. That's why the adventure bikes, they are made for this type of thing. Their suspensions and everything is built to handle the abuse. Big Harleys are not. They are meant to travel on smooth highways. Now, for the rest of the highways in Alaska I was going to ride, the other 4, when I looked them up, are in the same condition. So I won't be doing any of those. So my time in Alaska is not over, but it's greatly reduced how long I'll be here. Right now, I'm resting for 2 days here in Fairbanks. I will be taking the Parks Highway, or some people call it the Denali Parks Highway, from Fairbanks eventually to Anchorage, going by Denali National Park. Down towards Anchorage in Palmer, there's somebody I know. I don't want to mention their names because I didn't ask if I could. He is up here for the summer, so I'm going to possibly hook up with him for dinner and whatever. Then, because most of the fishing excursions are booked months in advance, when I called up here a couple months ago, they told me if I called them a day or two before I was going to arrive in the area, that I might be able to be squeezed on since I was solo. They said that would be my best bet. So I may go halibut fishing and salmon fishing, or I may not. But I will be exploring Anchorage, Seward, and Homer. And while on Homer, if I don't go fishing, there is a saloon in Homer called Salty Dog Saloon. Roxanne said I have to go there. I can't remember why she said, but she said that's supposedly a place to go. So I'm going to hit there in Homer. I know this has been a long video, and I apologize for the length. I hope you enjoyed it, and looking forward to some more adventures.